Ready, set, go.
Hey guys, welcome to Chi Alpha. As we kick off the second week in February, getting closer to Valentine's Day, we thought it'd be kind of fun to jump on here as a staff on Zoom and answer some of the questions you guys had about relationships. Just a side note, obviously this is not the end all be all conversation on relationships. Man, we are available and around and would love to talk to you guys more about this stuff, to dig in deeper. Just encourage you guys to do that with your Connect group leaders, encourage you guys to do that with staff, wherever you have connection and feel comfort that you guys can ask those deeper questions. But hopefully we get a chance to have some fun, talk over some of the things you guys are already thinking about. Hope you guys have been having a good week so far. And yeah, I'm just going to pray real quick and we will kick things off. Father, I pray that you would speak through us tonight to encourage these students, to speak life over them, God, to talk about some of the things that maybe are questions they have, or things they've been wondering about. Lord, I just pray that you give us wisdom, that Father, that all the students that are listening would know that ultimately your word is the source, that growing closer to you is the source for all of the questions that they have and for the answers that they're looking for. And so, Lord, I just pray you bless this time, that you would encourage students through it, and that you would help us to share your wisdom and your truth. In Jesus' name, amen. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to my friend Caleb, who will be guiding and directing the shenanigans.
All right, so I'm going to be emceeing some of the questions, and the questions we got were from the Connect Group leaders. So I'm just going to jump right in, and we're going to start with this question here, and it says, how do you truly know if the person you like is all about Jesus? Like more than just saying he's a Christian.
Or they're
a Christian, yes.
You go.
I mean, I think that's a good question.
We're jumping right into it.
I mean, I think initially I just think about having two sides, or I feel like at any point anyone could put on a show, whether it's one way or another. And so I think consistency in their life, I guess, would show, or would begin to kind of indicate that. I mean, I feel like there's, I can't think of the verse off the top of my head, but about just the fruit of their life. And I feel like that would begin to reveal what's really inside their heart. And obviously none of us can really know exactly what's in each one of our hearts. And we all have parts of our lives that are broken. And we're trying to continue to navigate and to kind of bring to Jesus. And so obviously one weakness doesn't indicate that you aren't, trying to pursue God, but I think it's kind of in that pursuit, what that would look like. So that's kind of initially what I think.
I think to me, this stands out as kind of the why community question. And I know that may sound a little strange, but if you think about it, when you go to date somebody or go on a date, you are presenting the best portrait of yourself you possibly can. It's not necessarily a totally true portrait. It's also not necessarily a totally false portrait, but you are doing everything you can. You might be taking longer to get ready. You might be spending more money than you normally would. You might be watching how you interact or the things you do a lot more carefully or differently than you might in your normal day-to-day interactions. And the reason I point that out or say that is in the context of community. And when we challenge you guys and encourage you guys to be part of community, you get the opportunity to see people around their close friends. You get to see them over time. And man, if you're a girl and you're wondering, is this dude really in love with Jesus? Is he really like following God with his whole heart? Man, watch how he treats his brothers in Christ. Watch how he holds himself in community. Watch, and ask, like, what do people say about him? Just find out the little thing. Like, you're going to hear and see way more than you ever would just trying to date somebody by seeing them in the context of relationship, in the context of community, for guys or girls. Man, it's like, it's like we create sometimes in the dating realm, we create this like bachelor or bachelorette style like universe where we're trying to make everything perfect, make everything come together. And the reality is we don't really know that person that well yet. But I think when we sit back and we watch in community, man, we learn a lot. We see a lot of things. We see, does he garner respect from the people around him? Do people speak highly of her when she's not around? Do people, do you see her consistently showing up for her friends? Do you see her prioritizing Jesus in her life? Do you see him prioritizing? So anyways, that's my 2 cents. I think it's kind of a community thing that you really got to see it for a little while before you know what's going on.
I mean, that's a hard thing, right? It's like you don't know what is exactly somebody's person's relationship with God. I think that takes time to know and to understand. But I think what you guys said is good. It's like, I know when people ask me like, how did you know Caleb had this certain relationship with God, right? Like when I think back to all of the moments, none of them have to do with like, oh, well, he was a leader in Chi Alpha, so that meant he was, or he, went to church and, never skipped out. Well, maybe he did skip out. But they were like moments that I saw that had nothing to do with me. And it was how like he was treating other people or going through things, choosing to like follow Jesus. Not that he's perfect, but watching that struggle and watching him choose the hard thing, even if sometimes like he messed up. And that showed me like, oh, in a relationship, he would be willing to choose Jesus even when it was hard. And that to me was like a strong relationship with God.
All right, so here's one we can. How do you know you are ready to be in a relationship?
Like, am I ready?
I'm still wondering.
This is a good question because, okay, when Caleb and I were dating, we had been friends for a long time and we knew we were gonna end up like getting married. But I had this whole stress of like, how do I know I'm ready to be married even though we're dating? Even though we were in a relationship and we knew we were gonna get married, I was still worried about like, am I ready? And we had this whole thing where I won't tell the whole story because it'll take too much time. Where like Caleb thought, oh, this is a good time to ask, and I was freaking out to propose. And it did not go well. And there was a whole surprise part. Anyway, and you can ask me later about that. But I remember like trying to get people's advice, like, how do you know if you're ready? I was so scared that I wasn't ready, even when the person was in front of me. Mm-hmm. And so that wasn't an answer, but I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts of like, how do you know?
Well, to follow that up eventually, then why did you say yes?
That's a
what about the change, or what did you progress to kind of identify? I know this is like being ready for marriage versus dating, but I guess I feel like it can kind of be
like if you're dating,
synonymous with starting a relationship as well.
I mean, I think I realized that the reason I didn't think I was ready was because I thought I had to be like perfect, and I never was going to be. But I had like worked through so much like past pain, but I thought that there was some sort of magic threshold of like, okay, now I am ready to be in a relationship. And I hate to say this, but I feel like I don't really think that there is. Like, I don't think there's a moment where you can say, oh, I am ready. I do think there's factors of like, you got to think practically. Like if you are, I don't know.
If you're about to move to like Uruguay.
Yeah, like don't marry someone who doesn't want to live in Uruguay. Or don't date somebody who doesn't want to move to Uruguay. Like I think there's practical factors, but I think this is more of a question of like, how do you know inside if you're ready? Mm-hmm. I do think though, there was a time where Caleb said, he was like, we can't talk because you're obviously looking for me to like be some kind of like strong. What did you say? Do you even remember?
I think something about like in my head, it's sort of like be Jesus. Like you want to rely on me to the point where not like savior, but to be more than I should be is maybe a better.
And like I was pretty old and pretty mature, but I was just in a really stressful time of my life, and like I think Caleb recognized like this could be potentially me going to him instead of God. And I don't, so in that sense, no, even though I was mature and I was leading Chi Alpha and all this stuff, I wasn't in here in a space where I should be starting a relationship. And it didn't have to do with like how much along this maturity, but the season wasn't like the right season for me to like be starting that. And then of course I was like, don't tell me what I'm an independent lady or whatever. And then later I was like, yeah, you're right. That was one of the moments where I was like, oh, like he's willing to like put what he wants aside for like what Jesus might want in his life and in my life. So I feel like that was, yeah, that was like a time that I realized, hey, I really need God to be my main
Yeah.
source of.
I think too, if you're asking yourself that question, I think your first place to start is to like stop, move the relationship aspect of it aside, that other person aside, and ask, why am I asking this question? Like dig down to the core of like,
Mhm.
what's the fear behind this that's driving me to ask this question. And I'd encourage people to do that with close friends, with people that they know love Jesus and love them, and aren't afraid to speak hard truths, to be able to sit and process some of that. I know in my own experience, I can think of an example of a good friend of mine who, he and this girl started dating, and probably a month after they were dating, we were hanging out talking. He goes, I don't know if I'm ready to be in a relationship. And I was like, little late, bro.
I started to think about it before you asked.
And so I just started asking him some questions about, well, why, and what are you thinking? And what it unearthed was a whole bunch of stuff in him that he was nervous about, that he really hadn't put before God, that he really hadn't, put on the altar, so to speak, to see what God would say, or to see if God would take it or leave it. And so it got to this really awkward moment where it kind of ended up, he's looking at me, I'm looking at him. We're both kind of thinking the same thing. One of us finally said, I think you should put the relationship on hold. Like, you should step out of the relationship. And he did, which was really cool. And it was challenging. There were some hurt feelings and some struggles, and some feelings of rejection and different things, which is why I encourage everyone, slow, man. Take things. There is no need to rush into things. If you want to spend the rest of your life with that person, cool. You're going to have a boatload of time. Stop worrying about the like 2 seconds at the beginning. Take some time. You can alleviate a lot of pain by not rushing into things. But he stepped back, and the cool thing is, God did a whole bunch of work in him. They ended up getting married about a year later after, and they legitimately, this wasn't like a pretend, oh, we'll step back, but we're still like sneak dating or doing whatever. We're pretty much still dating, but we're pretending like we're not. It wasn't that at all. They actually really did like separate apart, and he took the time to really dig in with myself and a few other guys that he was close with. And it brought up all sorts of stuff, man. He was dealing with past family stuff, things where his dad hadn't stuck around, and he was nervous about, am I going to be the same way? Just a whole bunch of things. That's why I think it's so important, man, that you kind of ask that question. Like, if that's coming up in your head, I'm going to process, why is this coming up? Why am I wondering this? And be willing to give it the time it needs or requires for you to actually process it for real with some trusted people.
No, Sean, that's really good. And I think like even going off of that, like asking yourself, well, am I trying to fill? I've had a lot of conversations with friends where it's like, well, are you trying to fill something right now? Like, are you trying to fill a relational void? Are you dating because all your friends are dating right now and you don't want to be the only single one? Are you bored? Like, what is this void in your life that you're trying to fill? Or is it legitimately a healthy thing that you feel like God's giving you peace about and that you're wanting to step into? Don't date just for the heck of it. Because I think like when you get to the root of it, I think sometimes it's like, wait, maybe I am like trying to fill a past hurt or trying to fill a void or trying to like ignore all these other things that are going on in my life, and like things will be better if I'm just in a relationship.
That was really good. I hope you guys were listening to that. That was good.
I mean, I think we all, for the most part, desire to be in a relationship at some point, someday, so there's that desire, thought, longing, however you might anticipate those feelings and thoughts and trying to live them out. And so I think, but one question I think before is to ask yourself, like, am I ready? Because there are different things along the way that can not be like, I guess in some ways they could be deal breakers, but like really like checking your heart and knowing where you're at. But then I think also we're never going to be perfect. There's never this like threshold, I've reached this point. And so I think at that point, you're like confident or willing to like, I'm going to begin to continue to press into it, like work through things as things come up and not be afraid. Because really the reality is you could think you're in a really good spot and then you start dating someone and then the next level of your own issues and struggles
Just
start
kidding.
coming up.
Relationships
And
are
it's
great.
like, oh, I'm being tried, I'm being tested, I'm being like, and you
Mhm.
think it's the other person, but it's like, that stuff's in you. So it's like, there's never this, I think, perfect threshold.
That's like a really good point, because I think sometimes we think of relationships or even like marriage as, oh, great, I finally have this thing I've been wanting and waiting for. And no, I'm not doing it to fulfill everything in me, but it's going to be, I don't know, butterflies and rainbows. That's it. And it is like amazing to have like a partner that you can like live out even more like the things that God has for you, and someone like there to, walk in the things that you're called to do, or however you want to say that. But it's also so God can like break open like a lot of the things in your life and like make you more like him and understand what that's like. And all of us understand that a lot of our growth comes out of like struggle
Tension.
and tension. Yeah. And I think that that's one thing to think about when you're thinking, am I ready to be in a relationship? Not, am I perfect enough or am I healthy enough? But am I strong enough and ready enough to like have all of that opened up? Do I have like the time and energy and the willingness and strength to work through those things with somebody else?
I'm going to jump into the next question. Should girls ask guys out if they like them? Like if the vibes are there, but he doesn't ask.
The vibes
I'm
are
too old to understand vibes, so I don't know.
I like the hear from the men.
Yeah.
Right, Rachel?
Yes.
I really like to hear from the men on this one.
I mean, okay, so I go back and forth on this, to be honest. In terms of a relationship, I think there is an element of having a sense of leadership in the relationship. And I feel like this can be the first step in that, kind of making that initial kind of jump. There is an element to, I think, guys, I guess, making that initial, say, ask. Sometimes it's like, like the guy might even recognize the vibe.
Do they though?
I think sometimes they're
To be
oblivious,
honest, to be honest.
but I think they do notice and they like the vibes. But deep down, they
Let's get real.
probably know that for whatever reason they're not ready for it or something. There's something that they're not wanting to jump into it.
Do you think if the
And
girl,
so-
sorry, go ahead.
And so I was gonna say, I mean, I think that comes with both directions. Like sometimes people that don't know they're in a relation or know that they shouldn't be in one, or for whatever reason, like we just talked about. But then they like being liked. They like that connection. And so they, I guess, like kind of being in this limbo and not making a kind of direct statement of stop liking me. Just kidding.
Are you saying that like sometimes the guy doesn't ask because he just likes, I'm not saying anything bad about guys as a
Like to
be
liked.
liked, but they're not wanting to take that jump. And they might even like back, but they're not like really ready or serious to like jump into that.
I would say
could
that
see
is one explanation of that. I mean, I think there is too, like, even like when I proposed, it was like, even though I knew you were going to say yes, there's still an element of like, I don't know,
I was like, no,
putting yourself out there. I mean, there's something about putting yourself out there that
okay,
is
that's hard.
risky and whatever. And so I think sometimes like you want to know. But I think too, there could be some, your friend tells my friend, hey, just so you know, like somehow helping to define what is going on. I think sometimes maybe having some outside prodding is healthy.
Like,
Can be healthy, but it depends on the motive of the person. Instead of just like, oh, my friend likes your friend, let's like.
I've seen
I want to be able to double date, so just you guys should.
And then I've seen almost like this almost forcing of like this guy then starts dating this person because it's like they're in this friend group and I don't know if this girl liked them. And so it just was kind of, and it wasn't the best decision. And so they ended up breaking up. And anyway, so it's like you felt pressured. And so I don't think that is obviously a good way to do it. But I think there's an element of maybe a girl, I think, letting them know that they do like them to some degree, whatever that might be. Because it's not like I
there
like
is
see someone
interest.
see
There is
someone
interest there.
like that I've never talked to, never interacted with at all. I'm like, oh, I like you. You know, it's like, so I think somehow there is signaling or
Do you think that
vibing.
flirting and like whatever is a good signal?
I think it depends. It depends on what your definition of flirting is and what that looks
Just
like.
throwing out extra questions.
I might be a little more old school, and there's differing opinions, whatever. But I think there's something to be said for initiative. If you're a female specifically, and your desire is that you would be with somebody who takes initiative, somebody who steps out and goes after things, helps lead your family, things like that. Yet they showed no initiative up front. Don't be surprised if they don't show any initiative in the long run. If they're, for whatever reason it is, and it may be their own inner struggles, it may be, and that part you kind of have to like, they've got to deal with that. But I've heard people say, oh, well, he's really shy, he's not sure. Okay, well, do you want to drag that along for the next 35 years? Well, he's really shy and he's not sure. So our family never really like grew or never moved forward because he wouldn't take any initiative. And yet somehow you're surprised by that when you were the one to start it. You were the one to like push things into it. He never really like initiated anything. And then 2 years into being married, you're like, why won't you initiate anything? Why won't you like, I want to pray together. I want to like, why won't you do that? And he hasn't done that to begin with. Why'd you think he was going to start doing it now? And so that may seem a little harsh, and I don't mean to hate on like any of the guys who are like, but I'm scared out of my mind to ask. Man, I get it. I can relate. But at some point you got to man up. We could go rounds into that topic where people would be like, you can't make that statement, you can't, whatever. I do personally think there's something to the side of initiative, of stepping forward, of starting something. As a dude, as a leader, it doesn't diminish the place of the female in relationship at all. And I think what was kind of already touched on, there's ways as a girl, I think, and it's simpler than you think. Like, I think girls are creating this crazy, don't hate on me because you're like, girls aren't that complicated. I don't know. I'm not a girl. I don't know. You can ask my wife. She is definitely a girl. She's the most amazing girl I know, but I don't understand. But I think sometimes girls are like going through this 45 steps of like all these things. And it's like, hey, slow down, smile at the dude. When you see him, smile at him. Immediate, oh, she's smiling at me. That's a response that tells me things are okay here. Be engaged in conversation every once in a while with him. Like, those are easy. You don't have to be dressing a certain way. You don't have to act a certain way or try to like do certain things to evoke like, hey, I'm interested in you. Instead, just be who you are. To you, it may seem like little things, but those are the things that's going to make it obvious to the guy who is like, is she okay with me? Is she whatever? And then like Caleb was saying, I love what Caleb was putting, like, the dude may just be like, I like the attention, whatever. So if he's not doing anything, if he's not initiating anything, let it go, man. Let it go. If he cares, if it's worth it, if something is truly worth it, you'll do something to get it. That's why we all go get jobs. That's why we all go to college. That's why we all go through, because something is worth it. So we go after it. Otherwise we would just stay home and, I don't know, sit on the couch of the house we were born in and never do anything. But if it's worth it, we'll go after it. So
I'm obviously not a man, but I found that to be true watching my friends get into relationships. And when it usually comes from the guy where they're like, I know that I want, whether they act on it or not. And so a lot of times I feel like we as women are thinking, oh, but maybe things will change, or maybe at this point, or maybe if, and most of the people who get, to marriage, and it's like the guy was like, okay, she is the one that I want. And it's just so like clear to them, which obviously girl might, I might fall in love, not right now, but like every 10 seconds before we were married. And so I feel like I've noticed that guys will be like, oh yeah, I'm attracted to her, but I'm just, yeah, I like her. But when it came to like this is it was like very, and they don't waver.
That made me, Onita, that made me think of, I remember going to a conference one time when I was in college, and we were driving together, and I think there were a couple guys and a couple girls in the car. Anyways, something came up, and one of the girls was like, my future husband could be at this conference. And I was like, what? That was like so foreign to me to be thinking in that way or in that mindset. When you said something in there, it reminded me of it, just how I was like, oh my goodness, like you guys think about that?
They're like, I'm thinking about what food they're gonna serve. And is there gonna be enough?
I was like, this thing's near the beach, dude. Do we get to go to the ocean? That's like that's all I'm thinking about.
We don't think about it until they like cross in front of
Yeah,
our
they're
Mhm.
literally like, oh, there's
One track. Yeah.
eyes. Like,
Yeah.
wait a minute.
There's a
Exactly. Feel good at the head turn. When you got the head turn.
where girls are like, whether they're there or not, or they exist or not, it's there.
How early in a relationship should you discuss boundaries? And then kind of like, how do you guard your heart while still being open and vulnerable in a relationship?
Oh, this is so hard because the term relationship, or we're talking about like, we're not talking about, oh, you've gone on some dates and you're getting to know this is like committed relationship.
I guess you can define it, and
I can define it as I like.
and then if there's
Whatever
more
you
followers,
want.
we'll have to-
Okay.
I mean, I think
Boundaries.
to address how early, it's like day one kind of a thing, where it's like, hey, like what are your standards? I mean, you're wanting to kind of obviously understand where you're going in a relationship and what you're going to be doing. And so I think like that would be kind of first thing. Once you've kind of set that stage of like we're going to a relationship, and it's like what do you think is a relationship? What, like, and getting on the same page and trying to like, and if you're not, trying to figure out then what are you guys going to define it as, and then what is it going to look like, and to the point of even talking about boundaries and whether that means time spent together, how you're spending your time together, physical boundaries, like all of that. I mean, I think that's something that from early on, because then if you don't do it early on, the ride is going to define those things, and you're going to go places that you don't want to go or regret that you went. And so I think,
and once you go there, it is really, really
To go
hard
backwards.
to go backwards.
Yeah.
And it's in the design, man. Like we were designed for physical intimacy and connection, and there's joy in that, there's pleasure in that, there's all those things. So yeah, I'm with Caleb on this one. It made me, when he first said that question, I was like, oh dude, before you even get there, like you and if you're a girl, you and your girlfriends, or if you're a dude, you and your guy friends, man, you should have already talked about some of these things and know beforehand, these are things I will do, these are things I will not do. Otherwise, just like Caleb was saying, like it'll be decided for you. You'll be like, wow, I didn't think I was going to handle a relationship like that. But you're like, well, we were sitting on the couch, and next thing I know, we weren't sitting anymore. And how did I even get here? I didn't mean to. I've heard it happen so many times. I don't know how it happened. Yes, you do. You allowed yourself to go over at a certain time, probably like after 10 o'clock at night, when you knew no roommates were there, decided to watch a movie, sit super close, decided to put your arm around, then decided to lean it. Like, don't tell me you don't know how it got there. It's not like you were daydreaming and then you opened your eyes and you're having sex with somebody. Like, how did I get here? What happened? You know what happened. And it's more of a matter of like, what'd you do beforehand? You weren't intentional beforehand. You didn't have any boundaries set. With no boundaries, there's no borders. You're going to go do whatever you're going to feel like doing in the moment. And I'm sorry, but that is dumb.
Wow, I like hearing this side of
Yeah.
The heart part of the boundaries and things like that. How do you guard
Okay.
your heart in the midst of that?
Mm,
Good.
And I think um, just off the top, like thinking, I mean, there is progressions that I do think you not guard, but maybe reserve.
mhm,
You know, you don't give someone your whole heart day one. You know, I just met you kind of a thing. And then obviously, like as you progress, I think there is an element of opening yourself up, being more. And so along with that, like what are your guys' thoughts along with specifically your heart?
I want to hear Rachel. I know you got some good thoughts on the boundaries and guarding your heart. So I want to hear Rachel.
I think that there is, and I think this looks different for everyone, but there is a balance between being authentic and being like fully vulnerable. And that I've had a lot of friends say to me, like, well, I have to tell them everything or I'm not being real. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that you can still be real and you can be authentic with someone and still know, like, okay, this emotional problem right now is going on. I mean, we touched on the physical stuff, but if we're going to talk about like emotionally guarding our heart, like this emotional thing is going on in my life. I'm going to go tell, like, for a girl, like, I'm going to go tell my boyfriend, like, do you need to tell your boyfriend? And I think these girls will come to me and they're like, well, I have to tell them because otherwise I'm not being real and I'm like lying or I'm hiding things. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that one, he shouldn't be the one, or she, if you're a guy, like they shouldn't be the one that you're going to first. I think that first you needed to learn to go to Jesus, and then you need to go to your people in your community, which again is why community is like so important when you're in a relationship. Knowing who you can go to when you have those things, like, and drawing those boundaries around those like deep emotional places, and like hopefully like if that's a relationship that progresses to marriage, like you will get to that spot where you do tell them and you share all those things. But I don't think that has to be something that is shared from like date number one of like, let me just give you all this emotional baggage, because at that point, like, there are emotional ties that exist. Even if there's no physical intimacy, there can be a lot of emotional intimacy attached to a person that's really hard to break off.
When you were saying, I think in terms of like setting the boundaries, I think that's one thing. Like it doesn't have to be like I'm hiding anything,
Hmm.
because you can set like you can communicate that I'm like, I'm not going to say tell you everything. Like I'm going to go to my
Hmm.
friend. Like there's if you set it up that
Yeah,
way,
that's good.
and it's like you are being real and the other
Mhm.
person knows, like, you know, you can like tell them you're talking to your friends about some, some stuff. With Onita and I at this point, I mean, we have people in our lives that
I was just gonna
confide
say
in
that.
us. We don't tell each other
Mhm.
what the people have told them, but it's like I might know that you're talking to that person, but it's not like, oh, I have to tell them everything. So it's
Mhm.
like I feel
You
like that was
can't.
I feel like
It's
that's
not
kind of
possible.
like that kind of goes along those lines. It's not quite the same situation because it's like personal stuff that's going on, but you have like we have an understanding that there's a boundary there that we're setting it for the people that we're talking to in a sense and keeping that healthy and strong. But then
Mhm.
for yourself though, in that relationship, it's like it's built in and know that there's an understanding that you're going to be communicating those deep things to your friends and not necessarily to each other.
That kind of goes along with what I was thinking. It's like sometimes we have this unrealistic, and not because I mean, when you're single, you've never been married. Idea of like, what does it mean to like be in a marriage relationship? And speaking from the now that I've been married, yeah, I thought being in a marriage, like, oh, this person is going to know every single part of me and everything. And yeah, we are one. And yeah, we do share a lot. But like, Caleb doesn't know, we don't have time for him to know every single thing I'm feeling and every single thing that I'm struggling with every single moment. Hopefully, when you get married, you'll still have a job. You might want to have kids. You might want to have like a hobby and friends, you know? And I realized, like, oh, being in a marriage is not, even with like sharing those emotional things, yes, we each have all of our heart, but like Caleb doesn't know every single second what I'm struggling with. There are times it'll be like, oh, how are you? How are you? Right? You have to work on that. And I think we have this idea of when I get into a relationship, this person is gonna know everything. Well, they can't. We're human beings. Like we
Mhm.
have to communicate, and there's like restraints and limits on that. So one of my mentors gave me this really good like word picture of like levels of intimacy or vulnerability. And it's like, say you have like a house and there's like a sliding glass door in the back for the backyard. A lot of us have that. There's levels, right, of people being able to see what's in your house. Like you can open the curtain and they get to see everything that's in that room, but you control, right, what's coming in, right? You control what they can see. I'm going to bring in my vase. I'm going to not come out in my towel, you know, like they can see that. And then there's another level where you open the door and say, hey, you can come in, and they can sit in there, right? But they don't go in the other parts of your house. And you might probably clean up a little before they, you know, come in and enter your house. And then there's another level where they're like, hey, can I help with that? And you're like, don't touch. Or you're like, yeah. And they're like, oh, you have, you know, let me neaten up for you, right? There's like different levels. And then there's like, hey, you live here and you can sell my chair. Because people always ask like, well, what does it mean to guard my heart? What does that look like? And to me, that's what it looks like. Like if your relationship is this level, like you're getting to know me, you can open the curtain. And sometimes you want to close the curtain. It doesn't have to be open all the time, right? And then as the relationship progresses, it's like, okay, now I've seen this person loves Jesus, is trustworthy, is initiated, you know, maybe they knocked on the door. Like, could I come in? Right. And then you decide. And so I think when we think of it that way, it gives us like a better visual of like, what does that mean then? Like what parts of my heart and my emotions and the things I'm sharing? Are we at the level where, yeah, I should allow this person to make decisions about what's in my room? They can rearrange the furniture. Is that a power that I want to give them? And then that's the level like that I'm going to share. Does that make sense?
It's like COVID.
It's really good.
Talking to each other through windows and things like that.
It just made me think of like, you know, you're walking down the street and come knock on the door because you're like, yo, I like what I saw through the window. Can I come in? Like,
then the curtain closes.
But I think thinking about like boundaries, physical boundaries, and also guarding your heart, it's like once you're in a relationship though, it doesn't stop.
Then you gotta be,
Then-
get out of the house. Like I'm already here.
Then it's like you have to build boundaries and physical or emotional with other people. You know, it's like you don't let, you know, and so it's not like, oh, I'm in a relationship, now I can do whatever. But it's like you're actually along the way, you're like learning how to continue to, I can't open myself up to any other person now. But like there's physical boundaries with other girls now, you know, because it's like, because you're saying yes to
Saying
one
yes to
side.
one
So then
thing.
it's like you're having to create. So it's like, it's not like, oh, I'm in a relationship now, I don't have to like have good boundaries at all. But it's like, no, actually,
You still have boundaries.
you have to have boundaries your whole life. It's something that you have to continue to learn and continue to apply in your life.
Well, yeah, because I still have to have emotional boundaries with Caleb. I can't just say whatever I want when I'm feeling it. We talk it like that. Sometimes that's a big no-no.
it could, it just wouldn't work out real well.
I know. So if you're just like, oh, I'm gonna get married, it's gonna be this, I can just be whoever, whenever. No, like there are times I tell Caleb, hey, yes, I am going through a hard time, but this is something better that I need to talk to like my best friend Liz about, like, and just hash it out with her before I talk to you about it, because I've learned like that's a better boundary. It's a lifetime of it, so might as well start working on it.
One really quick thing to throw in. I think our society has jumped into this like my person thing. Thanks a lot, Grey's Anatomy or wherever that originated from. And everybody's like, this, I'm looking for my person. And that denotes like everything has to hang on that one person, and it's garbage. Like it's total junk. Everything Caleb and Onita was saying, yes, exactly. And then on the practical side, when it's early on, don't start talking about what you want your family to look like and how many kids you want and all these things. Don't be a weekend telling them the deep longings of your heart for family and family trips and all that. Like that's stupid. Boundaries.
Back to singleness. All right. So how do you not feel discouraged when you're single and wanting to be in a relationship? What are things that you can work on in your singleness that might help towards your marriage or relationship? So I want to try to kind of get some kind of singleness questions that we can talk about.
Hit it, Rachel.
We've all been single. Oh my God.
Like right now, the analogy of just literally like turning on a light. So it's like, I feel like we have some friends and it's like they're longing, wanting, so they're in this, like they think it's going to be never. And then like, not like all of a sudden, but then it's like God brings them someone, and really within a
Short amount of time.
reasonable amount of time, they're like married.
And they're like, what just happened? You got married.
And so, and then realizing, I mean, obviously depending on how long you live, it's like, when you think about it, it's like, I will definitely be married. I mean, if I live a normal amount of time, will definitely be married longer than I was single. And so I think trying to keep some of that in perspective when, I mean, even if it's like,
if you got married
even if it's 40s, like I was going to say 30, but yeah, even if it's like
40.
Crazy 40, like way out there.
Way out there, so old.
But I meant, if you live to 80, like you're still going to be married for like over half of your life. So I think, when you're like 20, 22, whatever, even 18, so it's like realizing like, okay, I don't have to rush into this. Like there's going to be lots of time. But I know that there's also in that there's sort of a sense of urgency, maybe not urgency, but a sense of unknown, I think maybe might be, of when or how and all of that. And I think trying to trust, would be a good word. Trying to kind of not just like push those away, but trying to like be in the moment and be where you're at, I think is important, and it's good. Like there'll be time for it. And when that time comes, like that will be your life, But I think there is a reality of when you're single, there are things that you can do and have flexibility. And so I think trying to put that in perspective, where I think when you're on the other side of thinking about it, you think like it's never going to happen.
Yeah, perspective is really good. I think that's really good, Caleb. I mean, the reality side of it is that it does suck sometimes, like just to speak to that, and it can be really discouraging. Like I was recently an 11th wheel at lunch with some of my friends. I was like, what is this?
How many weddings have you been?
So many. I am turning into Katherine Heigl in 27 dresses. And so like the reality, and I think that goes back to that question even, right, that we were talking about earlier of like, well, how do you know if you're ready for a relationship? And are you trying to fill some void just because like all your friends are in relationships or they're getting married or whatever, like just to not be an 11th wheel, like, am I just going to go date some random person? Like, no, but it is hard. And I think for me, I have learned to have perspective and have friends around me that can remind me of perspective, because I don't always remember it. Like when days are really hard, I like having people I can text, having people I can call, or just be real with and be like, hey, this is really hard right now. And they can empathize, but then also speak truth. And they don't just let me sit in this like pity party. And then like doing things that you enjoy, like taking advantage in a good way of the fact that you're not married and you don't have kids and you're not in this next stage of life. Like I can get on a plane and fly. So like I can do all these things that I probably wouldn't have a lot of flexibility with if I had a family right now. Like that's just the reality of it. And neither of those life stages are bad, but they're just different. Yeah, I think like surrounding yourself with people who can speak truth, and then like doing things that can healthily distract. Like instead of, again, that perspective thing, instead of being like, oh, I can't go on dates and I can't like do all these things and I don't get to do X, Y, and Z that all my, like if I was dating, I would do that. Be like, well, what can you do instead? Like what friends can you go hang out with? Like what can you, I don't know, fill your time with that's like good and healthy and fun for you.
I would agree 100%. I get it. I just remember crying on my porch. Like, I am going to be single forever. There is nobody. And I think that those hard parts are when it is the unknown. Like, it's fear. Like, I was afraid I'm never going to find anybody. And my standards are too high. All of this stuff. And I think the really hard parts about being single were about fear and about really wanting to know that I was going to end up being married one day. And I think one of the good things, kind of what you're saying, Rachel, is having friends to remind me not that, oh, you're going to meet someone, but friends who remind me like their struggles being married, the struggle with being single is trust. Like, do I trust that God is going to fulfill all my needs and take care of me? Do I trust his plan for my life? Do I trust that? And it's not something that like just goes away, just like struggles in marriage don't go away, right? It's like a continual thing that I had to keep going back to. And I love what you said about like, what can I do now? Like, I remember wanting to be, not just like wanting to be the best single person till I got married, right? But it's like, I am single and I want to live that to its fullest, you know? And so I think one of the big things was that I got to like have such deep, intimate friendships with my girlfriends. And not that I can't have that now, but it is really different. You know, like all those late night talks. I mean, yeah, it's a little awkward to have a girlfriend late night talk when your husband's laying next to you. And just not make room, like she comes over. That sounded weird. Go have your time, like go have your girlfriend time, right? But it is different. And that some of those times were like the greatest moments of like being able to like hang out with my girlfriends and like have those intimate friendships and do those things together. And it wasn't just, oh, because I'm waiting to be married, so I might as well fill it with like a bunch of fun stuff. But like, wow, this is like the life God's given me, and I'm gonna live it to its fullest and do all the things that I can do right now. And one of my big fears, apparently my life is full of fear, about getting married was I was like, I have this like really close, intimate relationship with God and even like with my friends, and that's gonna change. And I did find like, yeah, my relationship with God is different now. And there was like a part of when I was single and being able to like work things out, just me and Jesus. And also, because the question was, how can I work on now something? I realize even now that it's better a lot of times for me to go to Jesus first before I try to talk it out with Caleb. And like, if I didn't learn how to do that when I was single, there's no way I would be doing that when I was married, you know, because it's like there's a person right there for you all the time. I mean, hypothetically, that's one thing that I would say is every time if you're single, like you feel like, what do I do? Yes, go to your friends. Yes, go to your mentors, but learn how to like bring those things to Jesus, because in your marriage, you're gonna have to do, or you don't have to, but it's like way better if you do it that way.
I love what both of you guys were saying. It makes me think of like the trust and the focus side, like that it really does come down to trust. And what I mean by that is our perspective of like, what do we think God has for us? Because when we get into that fear side, then we're not trusting that God is for us, that he wants to bless us, and it's obviously it's easier said than done. It's not just a quick little quip like, oh, just trust Jesus. And like, that's going to be ups and downs, but it is a decision. It is like a conviction of your will, of your heart to decide, I trust Jesus more than I fear my circumstances, or I fear what might happen or might be like it. I'm going to trust Jesus for what he has. And then I think, man, what I've always believed, what we focus on, we feed. So if you feel lonely and you feel like, man, sucks being single, everybody around me has somebody, you're going to just keep focusing on that, and you're just going to keep feeding it, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, as opposed to you being able to say, okay, this does really suck at times. And it's like Rachel was saying, man, like, I don't want to go be the 11th wheel, which by the way, you're probably like the best 11th wheel there is. Rachel's like the coolest person ever. So, but just saying, like, as we focus on those things, then that becomes what we repetitively tell ourselves. Like, man, this sucks. This sucks being in this spot. I don't want to be here. I don't want this to be happening. As opposed to saying, okay, I acknowledge that I don't like this right now. I acknowledge that this is hard. But what is amazing is how God's connecting with me. Like, I love how Anita was saying, like, man, she learned to go to Jesus first in those times. And if you start to focus on that, you're going to see what God is doing and building you. You're going to see, in the same way how Rachel was saying, like, focus on the things you can do. I can jump on a plane and go visit a friend. I can jump on planes and go to 17 weddings. And if I was married and had kids and a mortgage, I might not be able to afford to do that, or be able to figure that out in my schedule. And, just all of those different things, and realize the single you and the married you is still you. So like, it's not going to change all of a sudden. Like, the best thing you can do is to focus on how you're growing, what you're stepping into, what you're intentional about. Yes, your circumstances will look a little bit different, but I love, how Onita was sharing. The same Onita who was single and going, Jesus, help me. What is this situation? Like, I got to figure this out, and going to God with it, is the same Onita who now looks up and goes, I could tell, okay, Jesus, help me. Like, what do I do with, and then works that out with God, and then goes to Caleb, and there's just a different dynamic to it. Whereas before, she's working out with Jesus, and they would probably go to her friends with it. I think that just the focus and intentionality, like what you're focusing on, what you're directing yourself towards, is going to end up dictating a lot about how you feel, where your emotions go, whether you're just ticked off that you're single, or depressed that you're single, or whether you're really celebrating it and living it out, man, and living it well. And it's the same way in marriage. You can find yourself married, being ticked off you're married, and going, I wish I could do this. I wish I could be single. Same thing, man. What you focus on, you feed. You're going to make your marriage horrible. Or you can look at the aspects that are an amazing blessing of being married and lean into those.
There was several more questions that we didn't get to, but I'm glad we took the time, and I feel like we answered the questions that we chose more in depth, took the time to do that. And so, like what Sean was saying, like just as beginning of a conversation, we're definitely more than willing to follow up on any of these questions. And obviously when it's in this format, it's kind of like you can't really follow up immediately as you think about them, but we're available for sure. Thank you guys for your questions. We will see you guys later.